All right, I believe we are live. Hello, everyone. Happy Thursday. Welcome back to another GM Philosophy coffee break in the afternoon. Today, instead of coffee, I'm going with Ye Old Rockstar. We're talking about sensitive topics in D&D, how to deal with them, basically what to do, how to avoid offending people, how to make sure that when you talk about sensitive topics in D&D, it doesn't like hurt people's feelings or ruin the experience for them. That's what we're going to talk about. If there's anyone in the chat, I think there's a couple people in there. If you would drop me a comment, just let me know that everything seems to be working okay. Let me know you can hear me. Maybe it might be a good thing, and then we'll dive into it. Now, so there are some topics that are obviously kind of hot button issues in any social sphere. Politics, some social issues, religion can be an issue like this, polarizing topics. Charlie says, hey, Charlie, how's it going? Dalton, great to see you, Dalton. Not trying to interrupt you, but hello, you sound great. Excellent. I'm glad. Very, very good. So you have, these topics that are kind of difficult. And I'm going to be honest. We live in an age now where I think humans are trying to figure out a lot of things. Like we live in a society where there are a lot of people who have very polarizing ideas about things. Social issues, there are like a dozen of them that just almost immediately can spark sometimes intense debate, sometimes even anger or even outrage. Putting these things in your game, having them even come up at the game table can be a real challenge sometimes, especially if you're playing with a diverse group of people. Charlie says, hey, great man. Yeah, great man. How are you? I am doing great. It's an awesome day. It is Thursday. I'm super pumped, doing a lot of filming today, so I'm pretty excited. Now, with that being said, how do we deal with these things? How do we manage these things at the table and keep them from driving a wedge in the middle of our gaming group? Charlie says, you know that GMP in the pharmaceutical industry stands for good manufacturing practices. Just a fun fact for you. That's good. It's better than having it stand for something that might be like, oh God, is that what his acronym stands for? like something questionable or something like, I don't know, GMP makes me think of EMP, like electromagnetic pulse. So every time I see someone type GMP, like my mind automatically goes to EMP, which is not terrible, but it's not super great. I don't think any of us want an EMP to knock out our beloved electronic infrastructure to any degree. So yeah, it's kind of a negative thing, but anyway, whatever. John says, hey y'all. Hey John, how's it going? Okay, so how are we going to manage these things without letting them drive a wedge in our game? Now, earlier on in the Discord, speaking of which, if you want to join my Discord, it's free. The link is in the pinned comment if you want to join that. You should also download my ebook. Grab my Ultimate Plot Randomizer ebook for free and join my email list. The Plot Randomizer is a free ebook, lets you random roll plot arcs on the fly. But if you get on my email list, I send out emails several times a week talking about D&D stuff, TTRPG stuff. So join those. But in the Discord earlier, we were talking about this, and a lot of people had a lot of things to say. There are a lot of like themes to this conversation, and I'm just going to go through a few of these themes here. There are people obviously who play D&D who have gone through difficult things. There are people playing D&D who have opinions that they care deeply about on a range of maybe social issues, political issues, religious issues, right? And it is possible, it is highly possible that in playing D&D, whether it be in-game content or just discussion, it is super possible to make someone upset. Let's just put it that way. It's really possible to make someone upset. I'm trying not to be super specific here because I feel like this could be applied to almost anything. I hate to even give examples, but in my group, in my core group, probably the best example of this would be politics. Now, I know that in the United States, politics has become a very polarizing and divisive issue. And really, one of the main reasons it's so polarizing is because of Donald Trump, who is our new president, second term. But his basically whole political campaign has just been steeped in very polarizing controversy. And at our table, we have two groups of people. About half of them are just against Trump. I mean, there aren't that many people who are kind of iffy about Trump. There are not that many people who are like, well, he's okay. I mean, I kind of disagree with him on this, but this is okay. There are a lot of people who really dislike Trump. And generally, if someone likes Trump, they tend to just love him and almost see him as a savior. And then on the other side, there are people who just despise him, right? Nostros Los Lobos says, Session 0 is to vet fragile snowflakes with a fragile ego and a huge pettiness as wannabe dictators. In last AM is just beginning, or Latin America, I think, is just beginning, but you can still run a game with all the ist-phobic themes that make fantasy so funny. Okay, I get what you're saying. So basically what you're saying is Session 0, Latin America. Okay, thank you very much. I'm not always so up on these acronyms. Okay, so basically what you're saying is Session 0 is a way to vet fragile snowflakes with a fragile ego and a huge pettiness as wannabe dictators. Hence, snowflakes are kind of wannabe dictators by way of being petty. And I'm assuming what you mean is basically, so they're petty and they have fragile feelings about things. And so they'll try to control things if you don't vet them out, is kind of what you're talking about. This seems to be what you're saying. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm trying to just make sure that I understand where you're going with it. Okay. So, Session 0 is a very important part of making sure that everyone's on the same page. And I'm going to go back to my Donald Trump thing here for a minute. So like half my group is like they're Donald Trump fans. Half of them are not Donald Trump fans. In fact, I have some players who actually think he is the worst person ever. And I have some players who really, really like him. I mean, they're like, oh my gosh, he's the savior. Okay. At our gaming table, so there's two things about this. There is the personal part, and then there's the GM part. Okay. Before the game, when we're all hanging out and talking, I try to be really careful about even discussing polarizing topics. And I think this is really going to be the crux of my conversation, what I'm about to say here. I try to be really careful about even discussing these things. And here's why. As the GM, I want people to feel like they can voice their opinions to me. I feel like I want people to be able to feel basically safe with me. I want them to feel like they can tell me a thing and I will listen to them. And whether or not I agree, I will still accept them. I'll still treat them fairly. I will still be hospitable toward them, right? Because the goal of us getting together is not for us to agree on whether or not Donald Trump is a good person or a good president. The goal is to play D&D, right? Okay, so this is the goal. And as the GM, this is my goal. I facilitate this. I take it personally upon myself to try to make this happen in the best way possible. I'm going to take a little break and read this comment. Playing the victim is a way to control the table. So stating your themes from the beginning is important to get mind-alike players. My current group have from far left to far right players. Okay, gotcha. So I actually agree with you. Stating your themes from the beginning is a good way to get like-minded players, especially if you're going to be delving into any kind of controversial type stuff. And I don't want to just say, we all know what the controversial categories are. There's violence, there's, there could be a language, like, is there going to be cursing in this game? Are we going to be cursing or not? Are the themes going to be child friendly? There are several dark categories of potential content you can delve into. And I don't want to talk about them explicitly on YouTube because I don't want to make this like an explicit, I don't even want to say the words because the algorithm might pick it up and they might just bring the hammer down on me for even saying certain words. But there are very dark themes that could, in theory, be explored in D&D or in any TTRPG. However, discussing whether or not any of those things are going to go is a really good thing to discuss in session 0, because if you have one player who wants to explore those things and nobody else is interested in that, but then you don't talk about it in session 0 and then they start to go that way in game, that gets super weird super fast. And then how you deal with it in game and out of game can also make things super weird super fast, right? And I I hope that, like, I don't know if you've ever experienced like a player trying to do something in your game that you as a GM are deeply actually uncomfortable and not interested in addressing. Like there are, like, I'm a pretty wild GM. Like I will facilitate in-game wild content, but there are very hard lines that I will not cross in my games, and I always make these clear to new players when we start a new game. My core group knows this, and we have a very in sync, like kind of like we know where we go and where we don't go, right? And there's a reason for this. Humans can get uncomfortable with these things. Now let me return back to my Donald Trump analogy here. Or no, it's not an analogy. It's literally what I do. So my job is to facilitate a good D&D game, and this is how I think of it. When I'm getting together with my friends over coffee, I might talk about my political views. But when we're meeting for D&D, I am the officiator. I'm the community leader. And there's a political mindset to this. I'm here with an agenda. My agenda is I want everyone to feel welcome and comfortable. And I want them to know that even if they are the only one with a certain view, I will always have their back from a humanitarian perspective, from a community perspective. I will have every single player's back, because what I want to do is facilitate a good game. The only way they're going to get on my bad side is in trying to, like, maybe rules lawyer me past a certain point, or like try to control what I do in the game, or get mad at me and act out at me about in-game rulings, right? So it's about the game for me. Now, with that being said, what do I do when players say things to me? One player is like, I think Donald Trump is the worst ever. One player says, I think Donald Trump is the savior, to be honest. I think everyone else is wrong. He's the savior. What I will say to that is I'll be like, gotcha. Yeah. He's a very polarizing figure. That's for sure. Like I'm not going to agree with it. I'm not going to take any sides, even if I have an opinion. And even if everyone knows my opinion, I'm not going to say anything to alienate anyone at the table. And the reason for that is because my role is one of being a community organizer for the game, right? That is my focus. That is my goal here. So that's like that's the line I take when talking about these things. I'm going to take a minute and catch up with some of these comments here real quick. Let's see here. Nasatros says, but we all want to feel that Cimmerian world. That is what made us flock to TTRPGs. Modern day politics have no sense in a world of scarcity. I have the same habit with my beard as you. Oh, do you rub your beard too? Okay, gotcha. Charlie says we have a common understanding in the group where we can discuss almost anything. It is almost a standard that we have 30 minutes before we start the game as a social interaction. If we start, everyone is game. Okay, no, that makes sense. That's actually not a bad policy at all. Dalton says, I'm thankful that at my table, everyone is able to deal with controversial things in game without letting it devolve into out of character arguments. Session zeros are a lifesaver for avoiding disaster. I agree. Nasatros says, every character is fair game for DMs. We delve in fantasy to deal with real world. TTRPGs are our hero's journey. Leftist tables and their X cards are fair game for trolling. So I would say that's like a controversial thing to say. Let's talk about this for a second. So every character is fair game for DMs. So I would, if you mean every character, I assume you mean player characters. NPCs is a little different. Yes, every NPC is fair game for the DM. But when it comes to player characters, I don't know that I categorize it like that. Like every character is fair game for the DM. What I would say is every character has a unique story to tell. And it's up to the GM to very intentionally and with intentions that will provide the means for an epic story to fill in the pixels around those characters. So like, and if someone gets upset by the way those pixels are filled in, they can facilitate it. As long as the GM is doing their job to, make it fair and balanced, then TTRPGs are actually an excellent place for players to actually take action to do things in the TTRPG world to make a huge difference. They can become heroes. They can become freedom fighters. They can become drivers of massive change in the game world, which is actually super fun, but also it can be a way of expressing yourself creatively. It's like art. It really is like art. So anyway, that's how I would characterize that. Maybe I'm not sure if that's in opposition to what you said or not. That might be what you're talking about. But anyway, we delve in fantasy to deal with real world. I agree. That's true. TTRPGs are our hero's journey. I agree. This is very true. Leftist tables and their X cards are fair game for trolling. So I don't think a GM should troll their players. Let me know what you think about that, Nosotros. I don't think they should. I think it's up to the GM to take every single player character arc very seriously and to treat it with a certain reverence. This doesn't mean that you don't challenge them. This doesn't mean you don't throw dangerous monsters out there. But I would say that a GM should have more respect for themselves and for their table than to troll their players for their beliefs or what it might be. And if a player's character takes something in game and believes it, for example, if there's a political figure like Donald Trump in the game, and in game, that player's character happens to be a super right-leaning, politically minded character who really throws their support behind that character. Me as a GM, I should leave my personal feelings out of it, and I should facilitate like the best possible story for that arc. So my goal is the storyline, the story arc, and the player experience, right? So that's what I would say about that. John says, I prefer to refrain from real world commentary during the game. I try to get things to move along quickly if someone so much as says, make Gondor great again. Yes. Okay. That actually brings up a good question, which is, Nasatra says, make Mordor grim again. That's funny, actually. That brings up a good question. What do you do when these things do come up in your games, right? So my general rule of thumb is as long as no one is crossing any red line content, and nobody's having hurt feelings or experiencing any kind of like trauma, right? Or like no one's having what I would describe as any kind of like event that takes them away from the game, an emotional event or whatever, then I don't really see an issue. Things are going to happen. Story's going to progress. Players might have emotions about what's going on in the game, but this does not mean that it's going in a bad direction. Being emotionally invested in the game is a good thing. When I play, like I'm playing in William's game, Dungeons and 20s, which William's in the chat. How's it going, William? I'm going to get your comment here in just a moment. You said, hey, didn't know you were doing a live covering sensitive topics today. Yes, covering sensitive topics. But anyway, so I'm playing in William's game, and I'm playing a lawful evil Minotaur bard named Grom. And he's basically all about gold, wanting gold. And he's also very much like, he he wants the crowd to love him. He wants people to like him. And he gets super defensive and angry if anyone slights him or if anyone like makes fun of him. Like he like really needs everyone's approval. That's kind of his downside, which is really interesting. And this goes completely against me as a person. Like as a person, I tend not to need other people's approval. I'm a pretty thick-skinned, self-approving person. Like I don't really need anyone's approval to feel good about myself. That's like an aspect of my personality that is very much real, but I'm role-playing someone in a game who has the complete opposite mindset. So I have to think really differently. And there are things that happen in game that when I'm in character, like I've noticed that if NPCs act in a disapproving fashion toward Grom, or they dismiss him or they make fun of him, like that is a very emotional experience when I'm getting really in character. That doesn't mean that I have to be like offended or mad about it. And it doesn't mean that I'm actually getting hurt feelings about it. So those are two different things. Emotions in game that facilitate better role playing gaming. This is a good thing. But when things happen that pull players out of that space and they get mad in real life, that's when you have a moment to be like, whoa. That's when the referee moment has to happen. And let's talk about that in a moment. But I want to catch up with some of these comments. John says, I'm not going to walk on eggshells about in-world politics either, but it's not going to have an intentional real world parallel either. That's super fair. You don't have to parallel issues in your game world. You can, in fact, choose to stay away from them for the most part as a GM if you want to. Your players may not always play ball with that, but you can totally stay away. Personally, I liked I like to put hot takes into my games and then see what the players do with them. They're always facilitated by like NPCs and stuff. I like to rattle the cage a little bit by giving players interesting situations. They could walk away from them. Do they? Never, never. They always engage when I lay the bait. But I think it's actually cool and fun to put edgy parallels to real world issues into my games to let the players interact with them how they wish. And it's very, very fun. And in my core group, this is not an issue. I could see how this might be an issue and not work with some gamers, but in my core group, I do this. Anyway, John, that's just my response to you saying that. Let's see here. John says, I'm not going to go out of my way to poke a specific issue, but I play this game to explore the human condition. Stuff is going to come up, but I'm not going to attack any specific real world stuff. Yeah, that's super fair. And I think we have to remain impartial in a way. We have to remain diplomatic as GMs. We have to be, like I say, community facilitators. I think that's a key point. Nostramos says, John Haney, the same issues have plagued humanity since forever, i.e. I had a gay player who asked how that issue would work in a medieval-like setting, and a small research gave me good ideas. Yeah. So exploring things like that in-game, I think is kind of fun. I have had all kinds of what I would call different oriented type love stories. I've had straight love stories, gay love stories, love triangles, love quadruples. I've had groups of lovers love a person so much that it becomes like almost a religion and a cult. I have had players take multiple wives, players have multiple husbands. I'm trying to think what else. I mean, interspecies relationships. My games have explored all kinds of wild, when I say wild, I mean non-traditional types of orientations and relationships. And I think that's fun in game. I think it's funny. Sometimes it's fun. Sometimes it's funny. Sometimes it's surprisingly, I would call it endearing, right? I don't like to go into like explicit, like physical contact territory in my games. It's always and then the scene fades to black, right? I kind of do the fade to black thing, but the dynamics of the relationship, I think, are fun to role play. I think that's a fun thing to explore personally. Some people may not like that in their games, but my core group loves to do all kinds of wild stuff, and I'm down for it. I'm here for it. Let's see here. I'm trying to catch up with these comments. John says, yeah, I explore those things in world. I leave real world out of it. That's super fair. Dungeons and 20 says, I remember not having to worry about such topics back in the early days, but in the present time is a big change for sure. I try to leave our world out and be in my world of Solaire. Yeah, that's very fair. That's super fair. I think that is a very good stance to take in a lot of cases. I think it is. Charlie says, Grom is the opposite of GMP. That could be an interesting topic to talk about in the next coffee break. So how would you benefit as a person to act as a totally controversial of your direct own values? That actually is a really good topic. And that's one of the reasons why I chose to play Grom as a player in William's game, is because he's literally, in so many ways, he's like the antithesis of what I am. I actually tend to be a very religious minded person. Grom is not. He's all about money. I tend to be a little off put by things that are all about money. Like for me, I have a lot of passion, and I have values that to me are more important than money. Grom is not that way. Grom is lawful evil. He is inherently very selfish. He just takes care of his party members because they help him to facilitate his things. This is not the way I am. I am a very, I would say, lawful neutral, maybe could even be maybe described as lawful good to a point, but definitely not evil. I also do not need approval. Grom needs approval. And if he doesn't get it, it's like an issue. So it is very different than me, and I have a lot of fun role playing it. I've also learned some things about myself. That's another topic for another day, though. Nostromo says, we came up with treating that sexuality as it was a rogue, like having their own secret language to recognize themselves in an environment hostile to them. I think that was in reference to the gay comment earlier, I think is what you mean. In your research, if you're researching the experience of being gay in like kind of like, you know, medieval times moving up toward modern times in like the European world, then yeah, I mean even back in like the 40s, 50s, 60s, what you're describing is pretty accurate in the United States. And that can be an aspect of a world like where they look down on the gay people. Like that's, it could be in your world state, and that's not so necessarily historically inaccurate. I just think that like it's important to put those things, if you're going to put those things into your games, to put them into your games in a way that won't make players feel oppressed. So when I say oppressed, their character might be kind of oppressed in a number of different ways. There might be a little bit of racism in game. There might be a little bit of sexism in game. There might even be like they're looked down on if they're not mages, or they're looked down on if they are not a proficient martial combatant or a master at a skill. There could be a lot of like oppression in games, but you never want the player to feel oppressed. You want the player to feel like they have power over the destiny of their character. And that's part of the magic of the game. So I think that that's really important distinction to make. Nostromo says, we came up with treating, we talked about that. Also asked William if William has a YouTube channel. William says, yes. Dungeons 20s. Check it out. Nostramos says, consider me subscribed. Heck yeah, that's awesome. Nostramos says, Charlie, you're right, but current year politics requires everything to become political so they can be controlled. Charlie says, not sure what you exactly mean. William says, I've faded to black, and in other groups they wanted to test my descriptions and have done them too. That's funny. Test you. Do you? I take that to mean that your group voted. They all wanted you to describe further, to go past the fade in black. If that's what you mean, that's kind of funny. And it sounds like you did, which is kind of funny. Sometimes I might be willing to do that, but then sometimes I'd be like, nope, I tap out. Nope, I don't want to describe another second of that. Nostramo says the novel We by, I'm gonna butcher this, Yevgeny Zamyatin, I am so sorry. I said all of that completely wrong, probably. Explains that it inspired 1984. Nostramos, we in Spanish, but calling me Nostramo is an alien movie is an honor. Okay, I'm glad. I probably called you that, so thank you. I'm glad that was not a bad thing. I really am sorry. I often read a lot of things and do not hear things said, so I probably don't know how to say half the stuff that I say. Anyway, okay, with that being said, so the next thing, and I think the final piece to this is basically, what do you do when emotions pull players out of the game and they get like mad about something in real life during the game or something like that? Like, what do you do if the stuff going on in game, despite your best efforts to remain diplomatic and not to oppress players and not to make players feel bad for their differing views than the other players? Charlie has said it, I think, very de-escalate. So I will say that these types of things don't usually happen in my group anymore, because we have a core group that has been gaming together for years and years. And so they tend to not escalate. But in the past, when they have, what I would do is I would kind of pause the game for a second and I would be like, hey, friends, now look, it's obvious that there are real life disagreements going on here. Completely. However, let's remember that we're here to play D&D. You might not agree with you. You might not agree with you. You might have differences of opinion, and what is going on in game, yes, you might find this a really offensive take. You might think that this is crazy. And you might think that this person is crazy for thinking it's crazy. And both of you have a certain validity here. Okay, like in real world. But we're not in the real world. We are in D&D right now. Here's what I'd like to do. Let's take a small break. I'm going to get both of you a sweet tea, right? We're going to just chill for a second. Everything's fine. Like everything's fine. Please don't get mad at each other. Let's just continue to play the game, right? And have a good time. And then, I have a feeling that if we just keep it in game and, we don't make it personal, you could maybe back off a little bit. You could maybe, try to understand that they're just role playing their character. If we could just, let's back it off just a little bit and then we can just continue on, because personally, I think this is a fun direction we're going in. So that would be like my first attempt at de-escalation. That's what I would do. Charlie says, if you consider it as an escalated situation, but most of the times groups tend to know what topics are fine to talk about or what is taboo. I agree. I think my group has gotten to know each other well enough that is the case. It's more a case with when you're playing with new players. Nasatros says, when you know each other for a while, if not the case, an open talk about it is mandatory. This eventually grows over time. Yeah, no, true. Super true. So anyway, that's how I would describe it. Now, with that being said, let's just say, because things sometimes do go to extremes, everything is on a spectrum. At one end of the spectrum, we have people maybe do have disagreements, but they do not let it affect the gameplay, and they can still be friends, and it doesn't really matter. On the other end of the spectrum, you might have people disagree, and they get so emotional about it that it is impossible for them to separate it from the game in a certain situation. There could be someone who's antagonizing. There could also be someone who is freaking out honestly over nothing. Okay, these things do happen. What do you do when they happen? Okay, this is the tough part of being a game master. This is probably the hardest part of this whole process. If you have a situation where it is actually it's way too far over in the spectrum to be workable, it's not working. Like you actually see that maybe these two players are not gonna be able to work well together. You see that it's just not going to be able to move forward. I would recommend pausing the game and trying to de-escalate and salvage that session. And then I would have a serious contemplation with yourself over whether or not both of those players, one or both of them, can continue. You may have to remove one of them from the group. I know that this sounds cold and heartless when I say this. I've removed many players from my groups over the years, and it wasn't even that I was like mad at them, or it wasn't even that they were bad people. Sometimes you just have a player who it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work out. And asking them to leave the group or just not inviting them back is the answer. In this case, what I would do is I would kind of identify, okay, there's a range of questions. Which one of them fits in better with the rest of the group? Which one of them do I actually think was acting out of line and wouldn't compromise? Right? The one who fits in better with the rest of the group, the one who really does try to make it work, who really does try to compromise, the one who shows actually more care for their fellow gamers and more respect for their fellow gamers, that's going to be the one I'm going to want to keep around. The other one, the one who isn't compromising, the one who seems to just, I don't know, cannot mesh as well with everyone, I might end up having to ask that player not to come back. And it just is what it is. I have to, as a GM, it's my sole responsibility to keep the game running smoothly. And let me tell you, one player can ruin it for the rest of them if they're allowed to continue doing the things that are ruining it, if it's at that point in a very extreme situation. So that's what I'm going to say about that. And I know that sounds cold and heartless to me, but hey, it is what it is. I care about the game. I care about the game too much to let one player ruin it for everyone else. That's part of playing D&D as a community thing. You have to be able to get along with people. You have to be able to make it work with other humans to have a successful game. Let's see. I'm going to catch up on these comments. Charlie says, oh, we already talked about that. Dungeons and 20s. William says, I run so many groups online that I really have to do like a one shot and see how everyone's views and personality work. If I feel the vibe is off a bit, well, it was a one shot, so no biggie. Yeah, that's super true. I think that's a great way to do it. Robert Evans says, Superfly checking in for my first live. I hope everyone's doing well. Hey, Robert, great to see you. Robert says, not every game DM is right for every player, and that is okay. That is super okay, and you are correct about that. Not every gamer group is right for each other. Charlie says, William, can you filter the problem in those cases while running the one shot? And then William says, after the one shot, I can contact the players I think vibed with each other. I try my best to filter, but don't always get it right, especially since it's online and sometimes I can't see body language. That's super true. Yeah, online is more difficult. It's a little scarier online, to be honest, in the sense of like, you never know, like, is this person going to be totally unhinged? You don't know. You don't know. At least in person, you can see, maybe they're acting crazy without it coming out of their mouth. I've had cases where I've met with players at the local game store, and after 3 minutes of conversation, I'm like, I am not inviting this person to my house. I am not bringing this person into my home. Like, there's something about this person that is making me deeply uncomfortable, and I'm not interested in it. And I've had those experiences before. That has happened. It's rare, but I've had those experiences. Charlie says online is possibly harder. I can understand. The intonation is not clear all the time. No, for sure. It's the same issue with texts or emails. Yep, no, totally. Nosotros says, interestingly, most of non-straight players do not want their sexuality in the game and tend to play straight characters. That's actually super interesting. I feel like I don't know that there's a I don't know that I've ever seen like I feel like in my games, what always turns into, so romances seem to always result from two different places. Either one, an NPC starts to like flirt with them and they just let it turn into something, or two, they meet like some kind of NPC or character in game and the player pursues a romantic relationship with them. And then it seems completely random. It seems to be much less about the orientation, gender, or even species of the character they're pursuing a relationship with, and a lot more about how their player or their character is relating to that character, which is really interesting to me. Like I've seen straight people RP gay relationships. I've seen gay people RP straight relationships, and I've seen people who are monogamous end up with a whole bunch of different spouses, or in even a polyamorous relationship. Like I've seen it all. I've really seen it all I feel like in game. In my 20 years of gaming, I've seen a lot. So I don't guess I've ever seen, I guess what I'm saying is the common theme I've always found is that when players and NPCs have like a connection in game, that tends to be more likely to go into romance regardless of the gender or orientation. One thing that I will say is rare that I haven't seen much of are players having in-game relationships with each other. That I've almost never seen that happen. Interestingly, I think I've only seen it maybe once or twice. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why. I think that would be awkward. Actually, it's role play. I think it's funny I think it's funny to have sometimes when I run characters like as a player, it's fun for them to like flirt a little bit with the others, but actually having an in-game relationship with someone else is kind of like a whole level deeper. It might be a little awkward. So I don't know about that. I get enough of that in real life. I'm married, I put a lot of work into my relationship in real life. I don't know that I want to put a bunch of work into an in-game relationship, like I don't know that I want to do that. It's kind of like I don't know that I want to pay a bunch of taxes in my in-game gameplay either. I pay enough taxes in real life, I feel like. Anyway, let's see here. I'm trying to catch up on these. Robert Evans says, I am an old. We play at the LGS because it's neutral ground. That's actually great. I love playing at the LGS when I can. Nosotros says, Evans, I'm old as well. Turned 60 in May. Robert says, I dropped the romance option in my session 0 handout. And if there is not a majority vote for it, then I don't add it. But if the players do it, awesome. Nosotros says, have to leave, time to work, or I'll get rusty. Yeah, or work out, or I'll get rusty. Hey, that's awesome. Get that workout. Have a great one. And with that being said, I also have to bounce. I need to go get back to work, do some filming, do some editing, and yeah, just go do some stuff. So thank you so much for joining me for another coffee break. I hope you all have an amazing day. Thank you for talking about this topic with me and for sharing your thoughts with me. And even those of you who are in the Discord who talked to me about this, thank you so much. And hey, if you haven't joined my Discord, link is pinned in the comments. Make sure you join it. And yeah, William, I will see you Sunday. Looking forward to it. Robert says, great live. Thank you for the content. Thank you, Robert, for joining us. And all right, everyone have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow.